There's that D20 I was looking for. Roll off the table last session. I thought I'd lost it. Oh, hi. Hey, how's it going? I hope you're doing okay. I didn't think anybody would be here right now. I didn't... Oh, gosh, shoot. No, yeah, you're here for the video, aren't you? Because I said that it would come out on... Yeah. Well, let's not delay any further. Let me go ahead and clear my desk real quick from all my session prep, and let's go ahead and dive into what you're here to talk about. What did I say last week?
NPCs and villains in the campaign.
NPCs and villains, that's right. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, so to recap, last week, a lot of what we talked about was surrounding the sort of pitching of the campaign. That base layer that you need to have figured out before you approach your players and say, okay, here's the idea that I have. That's what we worked on last week. What I want you to do is I want you to go back to that document that we made, and I want you to really look at it. I want you to read through it again and make sure you still like the ideas. Because from this point on, it becomes more difficult to go back and redo and start from scratch. Because what we're going to be doing now is adding on to what we've already made. So go back, read through that, make sure that you like everything. All right, you did it? You checked it? Good. So now, let's go ahead and get started. Building a campaign isn't just about the plot. It's about the characters that make the world come alive. Most of that is the player characters themselves because they're the ones choosing to interact with the world. But as the law of physics goes, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's true in your D&D tables as well. So when players interact with the world, when they initiate action, there needs to be some type of reaction matching their energy, matching their intensity, and matching their enjoyment in the game. So if your players are really enjoying it and they're really engaging, you need to bounce back with that same amount of energy. The only thing that I'll say in contrast to that is if your players are low energy and they seem not very engaged, that does not give you an excuse to slack off yourself. If they're not engaging, so be it. But you still need to be able to try and give the best game you possibly can, because that's what's going to keep them engaged. As somebody who taught high school for quite some time, believe me, you got to do what you can to keep them engaged, and eventually they'll come back around to you, okay? Just sometimes it's hard. So today we're going to be talking about not plot, but we're going to be talking about characters. The most important ones we have as DMs are NPCs and our villains. So we're going to learn how to create NPCs that our players will love and adore, and villains that they will hate and despise and potentially empathize with. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to build compelling villains and NPCs that I use in my games. And my players love the NPCs I make and hate with a passion the villains I make. And sometimes, like I said before, they empathize with them. They see why they act the way they do, but it's not an excuse for their villainy, and they still need to be smote upon the side of the mountain regardless. So we're going to talk about how to make NPCs that don't just exist in the background, but they shape the world. They shape the story the players experience. We're going to cover key archetypes and how to make them threats or allies to the party, and most importantly, how to connect them directly to your players. So first things first, like I said, villains. Now, if you're looking to build a big bad evil guy, this is the overarching evil individual that is going to be the major antagonist of the entire campaign, go watch this video over here. Hey, I did it the first try this time. Go watch it. It's right here. It's called Building Better Villains, but it's specifically for building better big bad evil guys. Mechanically, thematically, using some poppin' ass music to really get your players nestling their jelly beans. What am I saying? Ah! So that's what you got to do to get your players engaged, is nestle their jelly beans. You heard it here first. Consensually. Duh, okay. Back on track though, so check out that video if you want. The key to building memorable villains is variety, okay? Not all your villains need to be mustache-twirling weirdos that are over the top and tying winches to train tracks. Instead, you want to mix it up. You want to add a variety of range to your villain archetypes So that way when your players experience and interact with different villains, they feel different. So here are a few common villain archetypes. We have the fallen hero, a once noble figure that was twisted and lost to betrayal. The tyrant, a ruler or figure of authority that uses their power for oppression. The puppet master, the one behind the scenes controlling events without getting their hands dirty. The tragic villain. Their motivation is understandable, but their methods are horrific. And finally, the reluctant enemy. They don't want to be the villain, but circumstances or obligations force them into that role. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what we've made so far, and we're going to see if we can create a villain, a bad guy, that is going to exist in the world with one of those archetypes connected to our campaign. Okay? So let's go ahead and do just that. Okay, so I went ahead and came up with mine. After looking at what I had come up with for New Tal'Ren, I decided that one thing that would be really cool is, since this is an unexplored world, that maybe long ago there was an adventurer, a famous hero that came here and never returned. So we have a fallen hero who's going to be a villain in some capacity that came to the island a long time ago, but they got corrupted by the treasure that was here. I think that's a really interesting idea for a villain. Why are they trapped here? Is it some type of mystical force that keeps them here? Or are they just so addicted to the treasure and the bloodshed of whatever they need to do to stay here and stay alive for so long? Can the players redeem them? I don't know. I just think Fallen Hero makes a lot of sense, and I really like it. It gets my passions a-burning. It stokes the fires, you know what I mean? Okay, so now that we have their archetype and just a little sentence about what they are, we can move on to the next most important thing, which is threat. So your villains need to be a threat to the party. And not necessarily to their own lives. At early levels, that's easy, but at higher levels, that's really difficult. This means that at higher levels, you need to target places or people that they love. The key is to make the players feel like there's something at stake. Early levels, you can do that with the players themselves. Higher levels, it needs to be things or places they care about, but ideally, it's going to be both of those. If you want to learn more about threatening high-level players, we just released a video on that last week. Yeah, up here. Man. Yeah. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah. So there are 3 different ways to threaten your players. Direct threat, which is directly threatening their lives as the villain is stronger than them and can kill them. Indirect threat, which the villain can attack something the party cares about, NPCs, their home base, or maybe a larger cause and idea. A tyrannical villain might attack the concept of freedom within the city that they live in. And then finally, psychological threats. Sometimes the greatest danger is an emotional one. The villain could exploit fears, doubts, or insecurities, trying to turn the party against each other or trying to turn NPCs against the party. So just as an example, this could be your party has built a stronghold and has forged ties with a nearby village, offering them protection. A good villain might not directly attack the party, but instead burn down the village and kidnap some of the NPCs. Suddenly, the party is invested because they lost something that really matters. That blacksmith was the one who sold me my first sword. That villain's gonna pay. I don't know why he's discount really awful Owen Wilson or something, but right, that's what we're going for. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna look at the villain we just wrote down, the archetype and the sentence about them, and we're gonna say, okay, what do they threaten? What could they, as this villain, threaten? And I want you to come up with 3 different threats, what you want them to be. This could be multiple psychological, multiple indirect, or multiple direct. So let's go ahead and work on that and see what happens. Okay, so I've come up with my 3 threats here. So I have one of each: direct, indirect, and emotional. Direct, they are stronger than the party for sure. Even in a 5v1 versus a group of level 4 adventurers, the fallen hero can still come out on top. On top of that, there is an indirect threat. So as we talked about in the hooks before, the fallen hero has been pretty much like manipulating the indigenous like simian fish creatures that I talked about in the hook just up above, and threatens them that these outsiders are dangerous, and if you go and speak to them, if you make deals with them, I will punish you for it. So while these simian fish creatures want to be friendly, they could potentially get into trouble. That's an indirect threat because most players are going to see a group of individuals that are being manipulated and controlled and want to help them. Most. Not all. And if you're DMing for a table like that, Godspeed, brother. You're gonna need it. And finally, we have emotional. So the mystics magics of the jungle allow the fallen hero to be able to infiltrate the minds of the player while they're sleeping, manipulating their dreams, giving them visions and this fake foresight of events that may come, foreshadowing betrayals from party members that'll never happen, but trying to sow the seeds of doubt. The fallen hero wants no one to find the treasure that he found or they found long ago. See, you can see how this stuff, it all starts to kind of come together, and if you keep all this in mind while you're DMing, your players are going to be like, well, shit, this is cool. And that's what we want. We want the players to be like, oh, this is cool. I want to interact with this. I want to do something with this. All right, and last but not least, for villains, we have connections to the parties. And this is something that you won't be able to work on until you start to know more about your player characters' backstories. So that's not something we're going to be able to work on specifically in the video here, as this isn't a campaign that I'm doing, and I don't have players that are playing in this campaign, but I'll use player characters' backstories from the current campaigns that I'm running on Roll with Advantage, just as a stand-in for now. So, the big thing to keep in mind about connections is that a villain without ties to the party is just an obstacle. It's just something the party needs to deal with, and that's fine sometimes, but it's not very engaging. So when you create that personal connection, the villain becomes so much more compelling. This could be through the backstory or through actions that directly impact the party. So we have something like backstory ties, which is the villain was maybe a mentor or rival to one of the characters. I know I'm referencing a lot of videos, we just talk about this stuff a lot on the channel. We have a video that you can check out here that is about ties for villains and BBEGs to the party. So if you're struggling to come up with ties based off of what your players have done, I went through every single type of monster, and me and Mark, a friend of mine who helps with stuff on the channel, we came up with, I think it's 6 or 8 different connections for each monster type in the monster manual. So you should hopefully be able to find some stuff that'll be helpful there. Another connection you could potentially have is hurt or betrayal. The villain may have hurt someone the party cares about or betrayed the party directly. Ooh, that's kind of spicy. And then finally, a personal offense. If you don't have strong backstory ties and your players haven't really given you much, have the villain do something so outrageous that every player will be personally offended, like burning down their favorite tavern or framing them for a crime. Those types of things, everybody's going to be able to get behind. And here's a very important caveat. You want to make sure that the villain, most of the time, right? There's exceptions to all these rules, but when you're starting out, make sure that the main villain that the party is facing isn't only tied to one person's backstory. If you can tie it to multiple, that's great, or even better, if there is a subtle tie to one person's backstory, but then there is a ton of stuff that the villain does to connect all of the players during the campaign, that is what you want. Because if it just continues to be that player's villain, it kind of feels very main character-y, and we want to avoid that. D&D is a collaborative storytelling game, so we want to keep up with that. Okay, so here's an example from my campaigns right now that was super effective. In my campaigns, I took a lot of inspiration from Wheel of Time, and I decided to use the same structure of Big Bad Evil Guy, where you have the Dark One, and then you have 13 generals, lieutenants, or Forsaken. One of those 13 Forsaken was a wizard by the name of Cassius Finch, and Cassius Finch was a professor at the College of Hearthcrest, which is a school that one of my players attended. Now, their character had this person as a professor, and this professor was assigned to them to go to this far off, sort of ancient, abandoned ruin to make sure that the student was safe and the professor was there to take care of them. Thing is, that professor was one of the 13 Forsaken and was there for a very specific purpose. Now, the ship was attacked by the forces of good, but Lila, the character, didn't know that. She just saw that Cassius, her professor, was nervous and was being attacked, and they were separated. It was only later on that she learned that he was truly evil, was corrupted by the shadow, and had killed countless people in his life in honor of the Dark One. It was a great twist for the villain, and it was a great connection, because all of the party members hate the Forsaken. They all want them to die, but Lila in particular had an extra strong connection to him. It was great storytelling, and it eventually led in Cassius being redeemed. Once he finally let go of that anger and was convinced to turn away from the shadow, sadly, he died, but it was such an emotional gut punch to all my players to see someone go from such vile hatred and twisted logic to realizing the error of their ways and letting go. It was really awesome. So that's why you want to try to make sure you connect not just to one player, but to the entire party, so moments like those impact everybody, not just one person. So let's go ahead and dive in. Bless me, we're done. So I have 4 characters here, split between 3 campaigns, Explorers of Afera, which sadly is no longer happening, and Salamander Coast and Isles of Iverion. So the 4 connections I came up with for my party of 4 is Nalfian, who is a drow from the Underdark, heard of a drow that had also escaped the Underdark many, many years ago, who was used as a cautionary tale for what happens when you leave, saying that he was tracked down, hunted, and slaughtered by the Sisters of Lalazar. I don't know, something, some type of entity that goes out and hunts male drow who try to escape. Then we have Cecily, who had actually heard about this hero before because he had adventured with her father, Tyr, before. Tyr is very old and has lived for quite a long time, so potentially they could reach out to Tyr and try and learn more information about him without actually speaking with him or finding any books about him. Then we have Varnast. So this hero, this fallen hero, had actually saved Varnast village that he grew up in hundreds of years before Varnast was born. But bards still sing songs about the troll slayer to this day. And then finally we have Twig. She actually read about a drow who had escaped the Underdark but suffered a great debt to one of the many crime bosses of Raven Rock. So he was a wanted criminal for a time due to his involvement with the gangs in order to be able to pay back the debt that he accumulated. And she read this in her Lord Uncle's study when she wasn't supposed to. So there, we have 4 connections to the party, all connecting them to this villain. I mean, that's a lot for one villain who may or may not end up being the big bad evil guy, but that's good. There's a lot of fuel to the fire. There's a lot that they can learn, a lot that they can know, and there still leaves a lot more to be discovered, which is very important. Okay, so moving on from villains now, let's talk about NPCs in general. So when I say NPCs in this instance, I specifically mean non-antagonistic characters that the players will interact with that the DM runs. I understand that villains or BBEGs are also NPCs because they fall under that umbrella, but for me, I like to distinguish villains and NPCs as sort of good and evil. So the thing is, creating good NPCs is really similar to building good villains. The focus is to have them help the party as opposed to getting in the way of the party. But just like villains, variety is key. So here are some archetypes that you can use for your NPCs. So we have the mentor. This is a very Gandalf figure, wise figure who provides guidance to the party. We have the ally, a reliable friend who supports them through thick and thin. The trickster is somebody who has their own agenda and may help or hinder depending on the situation for whatever benefits them. The protector, an NPC who is devoted to keeping someone or something safe, sometimes at a great personal cost. And then the reluctant hero, an NPC who doesn't help. Then we have the reluctant hero, an NPC who doesn't want to help, but then gets roped in anyway. We also have a very popular archetype of Boblin the Goblin, or Fartbuckle is another good one that has become very popular recently. Remember, DMs, if you're just starting out, the best way to make sure players care about an NPC is make them some small race, goblin preferably, small and monstrous, so that way they're kind of ugly, but like a cute kind of ugly, you know? And then give them a really dumb voice, you know, like, oh, hey everybody, I'm a little goblin boy, I don't know what to do, you know? Something like that, and your players will eat it up. They'll be like, we need to protect this thing with our life, or else it's not worth living and the campaign's awful. So the fart buckle archetype is also a very valid one to employ. So the nice part is we've already created NPCs in our campaign document. So all we need to do now is go back to those 3 NPCs and assign them archetypes. Who are they? What are they like? This will give us greater purpose in role-playing them. And when we want to expand them a bit for further stories and further interactions, we already have a pretty good idea of who they are, what they're going to be, and what archetype they fall in. So let's check out our NPCs and go ahead and do that. Okay, so there we go. That was pretty easy for my 3. We have Charlin Chalk as a Fartbuckle type. Yep, that makes sense. You could also categorize him as a mentor. He could teach them things, but for me initially, he's just a silly, goofy guy that gives them something. Then we have Lyra, who was our individual who, the forest, the jungle, the magic, something was affecting her. And it was causing her to grow more mean and more coarse. So to me, right now, she's a mentor. She's giving advice. She's trying to help the party, but she could end up shifting into a villain, which I think is equally as interesting, if not more so. And then finally, for Eris Tallman, we have a protector. This is an individual who is sworn to protect democracy and the things that she cares about so much that she is willing to do anything to keep it safe. So what sacrifice is she going to make to save the freedom of these people? I don't know. So then what we have is, in the same way that for villains, we need to think about what threat do they pose to the party. For NPCs, we need to think about how do they help the party. This doesn't always mean giving them magical items or healing potions. Helping can mean providing information, offering a place to rest, or even helping negotiate during a tense moment. So it could be something like giving information or a backstory on the campaign's main conflict, acting as a mediator in intense social situations, and providing shelter or safe haven when the party is in danger. This could be something just, oh, it's storming outside, the party needs a place to rest, come and stay in the inn for free tonight, friends. Or it could be the guards are tracking them down, they're trying to find them because they were incriminated in a crime they didn't do. Well, they can go to the priest at the temple, and the priest will provide them sanctuary and will provide them help in order to hide from the law because the law can't go into the church. Things like that can really spice up a campaign because then you have the players holed up in the church trying to figure out, how do we get out of here? How do we prove we're innocent? And working with the priest to do that. A reluctant hero situation, right? The priest doesn't want to break the law, but also trust the party. See, stuff like that's just so cool to do. Finally, we have connections to the party. Again, just like with villains, connections are key. Even good NPCs need to have personal ties to the party in some way, shape, or form, whether it's past relationships or something to do during the adventure to bond with the group. The stronger the connection, the more the players will care about what happens to them. So this could be So this could be things like a backstory bond, something tied to current events, or even personal stakes. The NPC could be tied to a larger cause that the party cares about, making them an essential part of the team. One example I have of an NPC, they were a sibling to one of the players. So this was Lila, again, from a previous example, and her sister Belle. Now, they both attended the College of Hearthcrest, and over time, while they were in Hearthcrest, Belle became an integral part of the plot because she was tied to this really dark and twisted artifact that was speaking to her, and one that she actually stole from the archives because she was working in the archives as a student. Now, over time, the goals really closely aligned between the party and Belle, and all of the party members started to care about her as if they were her sister too. It wasn't just Lila's burden to bear. Because the sibling was connected to the plot that was happening, everybody started to care. And it's not like Lila received any special treatment in those moments because it was her sister. Everybody's opinion was valid in that moment, and everybody let their opinion be heard. So with that, to recap, villains and NPCs are the heart of your story. They follow the same rules. Give them variety, make them a threat, or give them something to help the party and connect them to your party. Whether they're despicable or relatable, these are characters that will stick with your players for a long time after the campaign's end if you manage to hit them just right. In the next video, we're going to dive into encounters, how to build them, how to balance them, and how to keep them dynamic and engaging, because new DMs, time in and time out, that is what they struggle with most. So stay tuned, and I will see you next week for some more DM tips, and in the future, some player tips. Ooh, yes, keep on the lookout for that. So make sure you subscribe to see that when it comes out. Go ahead and like the video if you liked it, and make sure to comment if you have any other additional tips or any other questions as a new DM. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.